Now, as the race for the White House heats up, former President Bill Clinton has been on the stump campaigning hard for his wife, all the while trying to defend the Clinton Foundation. He spoke earlier this week at the Clinton Foundation's annual meeting, championing the work the foundation has done.
More than one of you has told me that this has changed the way philanthropy works, that the presumption now is there should be government, business, labor, non-governmental organizations, philanthropy, all doing this.
I recently sat down with political commentator and New York Times bestselling author Joe Conason. Joe is the author of the soon-to-be-released book, Man of the World, The Further Endeavors of Bill Clinton. And I began our conversation asking about both the campaign and the controversy around the Clinton Foundation.
And I think there's no question about that. You know, the Clinton Foundation has operated for 15 years without this kind of controversy at all. Republicans have contributed to the foundation. They have participated in its work over the years. They've praised it many times. But now, in an election year, you suddenly see a lot of criticism coming from the right. And I think it is based on the attempt to make the Clintons look bad during an election season. I think many of the people who are remaining silent or even saying some of these things know better or should know better.
And yet, the New York Times is not exactly a right-leaning publication, but it has reported on some of the controversies surrounding the foundation, quite often on the front page. Your take on that coverage in a paper such as the New York Times?
Well, J.D., you know, the New York Times was also the original source of the Whitewater controversy, and they got that wrong. I think they have a special place in their heart for the Clintons, not always an affectionate one, despite the paper's liberal reputation. It's true that they have published some critical coverage of the Clinton Foundation, but they've also published some important praise of its work. Years ago, as I recount in the book, a prize-winning Times reporter named Celia Duggar went to Africa with President Clinton, as I did myself 3 times, and reported on the lives that he was saving there, and did a terrific report on that. And, you know, without sparing criticism of him and his past policies, which her story also explored, nevertheless, she was very clear that the foundation has saved millions of people's lives over there.
Most past presidents have been involved in some form of philanthropy. But if you could compare and contrast what Mr. Clinton has done in his post-presidency as opposed to, say, Bush 41 or 43, or perhaps even his fellow Democrat, Jimmy Carter.
Well, you know, J.D., I think he looked to Jimmy Carter, despite their past differences, as a model when he was leaving the White House. And he had President Carter come up to Camp David in the last days of Clinton's presidency to talk about what President Carter was doing at the Carter Center, and I know he admires President Carter a great deal. Bush 41 is a very interesting case because I think you probably know they're very close friends now, and it was based on philanthropy that they did together, originally in the wake of the Asian tsunami several years back, when President Bush 43 called upon his dad and President Clinton to get together and raise money, and they raised record-breaking amounts of money for tsunami relief and became very good friends during a grueling and kind of heartbreaking trip through Asia after the tsunami that I recount in the book.
Who is the better politician, Bill Clinton or Barack Obama? About a minute for you to give us your analysis.
Well, I would say, you know, that's a very interesting question. They both are great speech makers. I think they both were able to mobilize big crowds of people. You know, Barack Obama had a special ability to inspire young voters that I've seen among very few politicians. Bill Clinton had an appeal across the board. At one time, you know, he was called the first black president. So they've had similar appeal to the voting public in this country over the years. I would say I think Bill Clinton has a slight edge in terms of his ability to appeal across the aisle. You know, President Obama has had a big challenge getting anyone in Congress to work with him from the Republican side. President Clinton was able to do it, although in the end, of course, they tried to impeach him. So there's a mixed record on both sides.
Well, as a guy who was in Congress and voted for all 4 articles of impeachment, I will say this about the Bill Clinton White House. They worked very hard at congressional outreach and the innumerable courtesies that were extended. So I had no problem with them there. Of course, from my perspective, Joe, both Mr. Obama and Mr. Clinton run second to Ronald Reagan. But hey, that makes the world go around. Joe Conason, we appreciate your time tonight. Again, Joe's new book is entitled Man of the World, The Further Endeavors of Bill Clinton. Again, Joe, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Good to have Joe on. Always good to have a little different opinion from time to time. Tomorrow afternoon on America Talks Live at 1 p.m. Eastern, former Congressman Bob Walker will be here. The founder of the Susan G. Komen Race for the Cure, Nancy Brinker, and Josh Nass, who is part of a group believing we can change the energy in the world through prayer and thoughtful reflection. Tomorrow night, right here on Newsmax Prime, 8 o'clock Eastern, Newsmax TV political commentator and former presidential advisor Dick Morris, also intelligence analyst Fred Fleitz, and Congressman Brian Babin. That'll do it. We will see you tomorrow afternoon at 1 for America Talks Live, back here tomorrow night at 8. Stay brave, stay free, stay